This video was sponsored by Card Kingdom. You can visit their store by using my referral link in the description below. Hi everyone, I'm Nitsahone, and it's Wednesday. So that means it's time for another deck history video. In this series, I look at the history of deck archetypes that have been successful at Magic's highest level of competition, starting from the beginning of that archetype and ending with the modern day. As usual, I ran a poll last week to help determine the topic of this week's video, and it was a close one. I gave viewers an option between 3 combo decks, and Ad Nauseam beat Splinter Twin by only 2 percentage points. There have actually been 2 crazy close polls. A few weeks back, Tron only narrowly beat out Eldrazi. It's pretty interesting that my viewers are so evenly divided on more than one deck. Anyway, some decks have some convoluted stories to explain their name, but that's not the case here. Ad Nauseam decks get their name from, well, the card Ad Nauseam. Ad Nauseam was originally printed in 2008's Shards of Alara, and it has one of the more disturbing works of art ever to be featured in this game. Apart from that fact, it's an instant that costs 3 generic and 2 black, and it has quite a unique effect. You get to reveal 1 card at a time from the top of your library, lose life equal to its mana value, and then repeat it as many times as you want. So if you have enough life, you can draw your entire deck if you want to. Obviously, losing a bunch of life is pretty big downside, but Ad Nauseam is still incredibly powerful and has been a key card in decks that have been relevant at various times in Standard, Extended, Modern, and Legacy. And in this video, we'll take a look at the notable iterations of Ad Nauseam decks over the years and examine how they've changed over time and why. Ad Nauseam has been at its best as a card that enables combos, as it can usually allow you to find whatever pieces you need to just go off. Ad Nauseam would first top 8 a premiere event during the Extended of early 2009. If you don't know, Extended is a now-defunct rotating format that features the cards from the last several years. In early 2009, Ad Nauseam appeared in the sideboard of 2 Storm decks, with one top 8 at Grand Prix Los Angeles and another at Grand Prix Singapore. These decks sought to cast a bunch of rituals and cantrips to get their storm count super high, and then fire off a game-winning Mind's Desire or Tendrils of Agony. LSV piloted the deck to a win at Grand Prix Los Angeles, and in doing so, he became the first player to top 8 an event with Ad Nauseam anywhere in the 75. I actually had a hard time figuring out what matchup the sideboarded Ad Nauseams were for, so I reached out to the man himself, and LSV was nice enough to respond. He told me that the deck could run into some trouble against decks featuring spells like Raven's Crime or Thoughtseize, and that in those matchups, having a card like Ad Nauseam was great, because it was just a 1-card engine, unlike Mind's Desire, which usually needed some more cards to really go off. In other words, you could be in top deck mode or close to it and use Ad Nauseam to draw a bunch of cards which were likely to help you go off with Storm when you untapped. Tendrils of Agony also pairs especially well with Ad Nauseam, as the life you gain from it can counteract the life you lose in the event that you can't quite win the game. This would not be the last time Storm and Ad Nauseam were paired together. After 2009, Ad Nauseam wasn't featured in any more extended decks, and the format was officially retired in 2012. However, later in 2009, Ad Nauseam would have a major impact on Standard, appearing in 3 of the decks to top 8 Grand Prix Barcelona, where it was a key card in a deck called Cascade Swans. This was the first time that Ad Nauseam was used as a key combo card, and not just as a sideboard card to bring into combo decks in a specific matchup. Cascade Swans is a pretty wacky deck that runs more than 40 lands. The plan with the deck is to get Seismic Assault and Swans of Bryn Argal in play at the same time, at which point you discard lands to damage the Swans until you draw enough lands to do lethal with the Assault. The deck could get the combo pieces into play quite consistently, like by using cards with Cascade like Bituminous Blast or Captured Sunlight. Another key way the deck found its combo pieces, potentially both at the same time, was to use Ad Nauseam. Because the deck is made up almost entirely out of lands, you don't lose a whole lot of life in the process. This would not be the last time that Ad Nauseam was a major enabler in the main board of a combo deck. It would, however, be the only time that Ad Nauseam saw play in Standard. Legacy was the first format where decks with the simple name, Ad Nauseam, first emerged. In 2009, Tommy Kolowith top 8 at Grand Prix Chicago was such a deck. It wasn't too dissimilar from the Storm deck that LSV piloted to a win in Extended. Like that deck, it sought to win the game with Storm. The plan was still to go off with rituals and cantrips and get a high storm count and then win the game with Tendrils of Agony, but in Legacy Ad Nauseam decks, the deck's namesake was obviously far more important for setting up the combo. The deck almost exclusively featured cards with mana costs of 0 or 1, so ripping through the deck to find enough action to go off with Storm wasn't exactly difficult. Once you found enough stuff to get your Storm count where you needed to, as well as Tendrils or a Wish or Tutor to grab Tendrils, you would stop looking, untap, and go off for the combo win. Ideally, you would also find an Auram's Chant, either by drawing it or tutoring it up so your opponent couldn't interact with you during your turn. The basic foundation for this deck has largely gone unchanged since 2009 with only minor variations. It remains one of the top tier decks in the format to this day. Ad Nauseam decks have also found some significant success in Modern. Modern is a non-rotating format created to replace Extended in 2011, and it features all cards printed from 8th edition onwards. Darian Elderfeld was the first to pilot an Ad Nauseam deck to a top 8 in Modern, which he did at Grand Prix Charlotte in 2015. This version of Ad Nauseam won in a way completely different from those we've seen so far. Rather than win the game with Storm, Modern Ad Nauseam sought to draw its entire deck and then win the game with a huge Lightning Storm. You could do this if you drew enough lands to discard to make Lightning Storm lethal. But this version of the deck didn't accomplish that by running 40 lands or something like that. Instead, it runs two different ways to completely ignore the life loss from Ad Nauseam: Phyrexian Unlife and Angel's Grace. Angel's Grace makes it so you can't go below 1 life or lose the game, while Phyrexian Unlife makes it so you can't lose the game if you have 0 or less life. If you have Unlife in play, you can even go well into negative life from Ad Nauseam, and it doesn't matter. With the life you pay from Ad Nauseam no longer a problem, you could just draw your whole deck if you wanted to, and obviously that would draw you enough lands and your Lightning Storm and you'd win the game on the spot. While modern Ad Nauseam decks didn't have access to Auram's Chant, it did utilize Pact of Negation in a similar role. It would allow you to protect your combo from your opponent. Modern Ad Nauseam decks, from this point on, featured the same basic core of Ad Nauseam and Lightning Storm as a win condition, and they also utilized Phyrexian Unlife and Angel's Grace to allow you to draw the whole deck with Ad Nauseam. However, about a year later, there was a change made to the Ad Nauseam archetype. Andreas Gans top-8'd Grand Prix Charlotte in 2016 with an Ad Nauseam deck that also featured Laboratory Maniac as a win condition. This gave the deck a little more resilience against sideboard hate cards like Pithing Needle or Leyline of Sanctity, which would just turn off your Lightning Storm. But the deck worked pretty much the same way. You would draw your whole library using Ad Nauseam, and obviously your Maniac would be one of the cards you draw. Then you'd untap and play the Maniac, and then one of the deck's several card draw spells to win the game. From this point on, the typical Ad Nauseam deck in Modern featured both Lightning Storm and Laboratory Maniac as win conditions, and this made the deck significantly better. This continues to be pretty much the way modern Ad Nauseam decks look today. Well, that's the history of Ad Nauseam decks from the printing of the powerful spell in 2008 to the modern day. Ad Nauseam decks continue to find success in both Legacy and Modern. If you want to help decide the topic for next week's deck history video, don't forget to go to my community tab and vote on the poll for next week's video. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future episodes of this series and tons of other videos, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. If you want to see the other episodes of this series, you should see a playlist on your screen shortly. Lastly, if you enjoy listening to me talk about the history of Magic, consider subscribing to my other YouTube channel, Need to Hone History, where I talk about real-world history. Thanks for watching.